Hi, I'm Brian Whitland. I'm lead trial counsel for Garfinkel Schwartz. I'm coming to you today from the Maitland, Florida office outside of Orlando, Florida. We also have an office in Titusville, Florida on the Space Coast. I'm sure a lot of you out there are familiar with Plaxico Burress, wide receiver. We enjoyed his time with the Steelers, but then he went to the New York Giants. When he was with the Giants, if you haven't already heard this story, Plaxico went to a nightclub, happened to have a gun in his sweatpants, and when he was jiggling for his keys or whatever he was doing, he ended up shooting himself in the thigh. So a scenario that could have happened actually would be such that Plaxico is in the jail, in the New York jail, wondering what he did and why he's in the jail. And if he wanted to take a look on his own and try to figure out what the law was that he supposedly violated, he might do something like open up the United States Constitution that might be at the jail. Sometimes they have them there. And he might look at the Bill of Rights and the Second Amendment, and he would read to himself, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Well, if you're Plaxico and you read that, and that's the law of the land, and that's the supreme being of the land, the United States Constitution, you would say, no problem, I'm going to get out of jail pretty soon, somebody's going to come and get me, no problem. Well, Plaxico ended up serving 2 years in prison for all the gun laws that he violated in New York. And the reason why this doesn't apply necessarily is because the gun laws in New York don't abide just by the United States Constitution. There are thousands of court cases on gun control laws, and all 50 states have their own gun control statutes. So he violated the New York statute, and he violated a lot of versions of it, and he went to jail for 2 years. Same thing holds true with the Defense-Based Act. When you finally figure out that you're under the Defense-Based Act and you're injured and you're trying to figure it out on your own, it's funny because the Defense-Based Act is only 3 pages long. It's kind of like the Constitution. 3 pages long, it tells you what this and that, this or there. But the problem with that is there's a thing called the Code of Federal Regulations, and a lot of people have never even heard of that. But what that is basically there are hundreds of regulations that are attached to the Defense-Based Act and the Longshore Act that actually interpret the law, kind of like all the cases interpret the Constitution. And what that means is if you really wanted to know what your rights were under the Defense-Based Act and you read it, you would have to read upwards of 1,000 Code of Federal Regulations. There are also thousands of federal cases that interpret the Defense-Based Act in different ways. There are also different segments of the United States in terms of circuits. They're called circuits. And judges in different circuits actually interpret the law different ways. So you might think you know the rights in Florida, and you do your own research. But if a person lives in Washington, the laws could be completely different based on the case law, the federal case law out there. They could be completely different, less conservative or more conservative in any region of the United States that you're in. So instead of doing your own research, what I suggest, because our service under the federal law is that you don't pay the lawyer for any of their services, the insurance company or your employer does if I get you benefits. It would be to your benefit to have a law firm that specializes in only these thousands of items every day, full time. Garfinkel Schwartz, that's all we do. So if you don't hire me as a lawyer, I would highly recommend that you do hire a lawyer, and don't hire a lawyer that doesn't know what they're doing in terms of federal workers' compensation type issues under the Defense-Based Act. Again, Brian signing off from the Maitland office. I hope to talk to you again. Thank you.